Mr. Speaker, I rise today to formally turn the page on an unfortunate period in Canada's past. A period during which a group of people who only sought to build a better life, were repeatedly and deliberately singled out for unjust treatment. I speak, of course, of the head tax that was imposed on Chinese immigrants to this country, as well as the other restrictive measures that followed. Le Canada que nous connaissons aujourd'hui ne sera pas ce qu'il est sans les efforts des travailleuses et des travailleurs chinois qui ont commencé à arriver au milieu du XIXe siècle. Almost exclusively young men, these Chinese immigrants made the difficult decision to leave their families behind in order to pursue opportunities in a country halfway around the world they called Gold Mountain. Beginning in 1881, over 15,000 of these Chinese pioneers became involved in the most important nation-building enterprise in Canadian history, the construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway. From the shores of the St. Lawrence across the seemingly endless expanses of shield and prairie, climbing the majestic Rockies and cutting through the rugged terrain of British Columbia, this transcontinental link was the ribbon of steel that bound our fledgling country together. It was an engineering feat that was instrumental to the settlement of the West and the subsequent development of the Canadian economy, and one for which the back-breaking toil of Chinese laborers was largely responsible. The conditions under which these men worked were at best harsh and at times impossible. Tragically, some 1,000 Chinese laborers died during the building of the CPR. But in spite of it all, these Chinese immigrants persevered and in doing so helped to ensure the future of this country. But from the moment the railway was completed, Canada turned its back on these men. Beginning with the Chinese Immigration Act of 1885, a head tax of $50 was imposed on Chinese newcomers in an attempt to deter immigration. Not content with the tax's effect, the government subsequently raised the amount to $100 in 1900 and then to $500 in 1903, the equivalent of 2 years' wages. This tax remained in place until 1923, when the government amended the Chinese Immigration Act and effectively banned most Chinese immigrants until 1947. Similar legislation existed in the Dominion of Newfoundland, which also imposed a head tax between 1906 and 1949, when Newfoundland joined Confederation. The Government of Canada recognizes the stigma and exclusion experienced by the Chinese as a result. We acknowledge the high cost of the head tax meant that many family members were left behind in China, never to be reunited, or that families lived apart and in some cases in extreme poverty for years. We also recognize that our failure to truly acknowledge these historical injustices has prevented many in the community from seeing themselves as fully Canadian. Par conséquent, Monsieur le Président, au nom de tous les Canadiens et du gouvernement du Canada, nous présentons des excuses complètes aux Canadiennes et aux Canadiens d'origine chinoise pour la taxe d'entrée, et nous sommes profondément désolés de l'exclusion des immigrants qui a suivi. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, once again, on behalf of the people and government of Canada, we offer a full apology to Chinese Canadians for the head tax and express our deepest sorrow for the subsequent exclusion of Chinese immigrants. Gana Dai Dohi. Mr. Speaker, this apology is not about liability today. It is about reconciliation with those who endured such hardship and the broader Chinese-Canadian community, one that continues to make such an invaluable contribution to this great country. And while Canadian courts have ruled that the head tax and immigration prohibition were legally authorized at the time, we fully accept the moral responsibility to acknowledge these shameful policies of our past. For over 6 decades, these race-based financial measures, aimed solely at the Chinese, were implemented with deliberation by the Canadian state. This was a grave injustice and one we are morally obligated to acknowledge. To give substantive meaning to today's apology, the Government of Canada will offer symbolic payments to living head tax payers and living spouses of deceased payers. In addition, we will establish funds to help finance community projects aimed at acknowledging the impasse of past wartime measures and immigration restrictions and the head tax on the Chinese-Canadian community and on other ethnocultural communities. Aucun pays n'est pas parfait. Comme tous les autres, le Canada a commis des erreurs par le passé, nous en sommes conscients. Toutefois, le peuple canadien est juste et bon, et il prend des mesures réparatrices lorsqu'il s'est trompé. And even though the head tax, a product of a profoundly different time, lies far in our past, we feel compelled to right this historic wrong for the simple reason that it is the decent thing to do, a characteristic to be found at the core of the Canadian soul. Mr. Speaker, in closing, let me assure the House that this government will continually strive to ensure that similar unjust practices are never allowed to happen again. We have the collective responsibility to build a country based firmly on the notion of equality of opportunity, regardless of one's race or ethnic origin. Our deep sorrow over the racist actions of our past will nurture an unwavering commitment to build a better life for all Canadians. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.